Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I'm Sydney, an economist. A few years ago, if you had asked me, I would have said I had everything. A loving husband, Colton, our sweet daughter, Bianca, and a cozy home that was all ours. But let me start from the beginning, back when our days were full of hope and dreams for the future. It was a lazy Thursday afternoon. The sunlight was peeking through the curtains, and the smell of fresh bread from Colton's bakery filled the air. Colton was in the kitchen, his hands covered in flour, focused on his work in a way that always made me smile. "Sydney, can you grab the vanilla extract? It's on the top shelf," Colton called out, not looking up from his mixing bowl. I walked to the pantry and reached for the bottle. "You know, you could put things where I can reach them," I teased as I handed it to him. Colton grinned, wiping his hands on his apron. "Where's the fun in that? I like it when you have to stretch," he joked. I rolled my eyes. "You're impossible, you know that." "That's why you married me," he said with a playful smirk before turning back to his dough. In the living room, our 5-year-old, Bianca, was lying on the floor, surrounded by her coloring books. She was humming a tune as she focused on her drawing. "Mommy, look. I'm drawing a picture of our family," she said, waving me over. "It looks fantastic, Bianca," I said with a smile. Turning back to Colton, I brought up something that had been on my mind. "Speaking of the bakery, have you thought about what we talked about? Maybe expanding?" Colton's cheerful expression shifted, and a slight frown appeared. "Sydney, we've been over this. The bakery is fine just the way it is. Why mess with something that's already good?" I hesitated but pressed on. "But we could do so much more. For Bianca's future. Maybe even get that house we've always dreamed about." Colton ran a hand through his hair, looking uneasy. "I don't know, Sydney. I like the bakery small and manageable. A bigger place would just be more stress." I felt a wave of frustration, but decided to let it go. Okay. I just think we should think bigger, that's all." Colton shrugged, his voice carrying a hint of irritation. "Maybe, but let's just enjoy today, all right? No more talk about expanding." I nodded, not wanting to ruin the day. As the afternoon wore on, the warmth of the sunlight faded, and the day slowly came to an end. I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Colton and I used to be a team, dreaming and planning together, but lately, it felt like we were on different paths, especially when it came to our goals and future. As weeks turned into months, the fun and light conversations we used to share began to lose their spark. The bakery, once a symbol of our shared dreams, now felt like a reminder of missed opportunities. While I was busy moving up at work, Colton seemed happy to stay where he was. That's when the first signs of trouble started to show. One evening, after a tough day at work filled with deadlines and numbers, I came home exhausted. Colton was in the living room, feet up, scrolling through his phone. The bakery had closed early, and he hadn't picked up Bianca from school. My mom had stepped in again, like she often did these days. "Colton, you were supposed to pick up Bianca today." "I had a meeting and couldn't make it," I said, trying to keep calm. Colton didn't even look up. "Oh, was that today?" "I forgot," he said casually. "Forgot?" "Colton, this keeps happening. You need to step up," I said, my frustration starting to show. Finally, he looked up, and I could see the irritation in his eyes. I said, "I'm sorry, Sydney. What more do you want? I'm not the only parent here." I took a deep breath, trying not to lose my temper. "It's not just about picking up Bianca. It's about us, our future. Don't you think we should be doing more for her, for our families?" Colton shrugged, his face blank. "We're doing fine, Sydney. Why do you always want more? Can't you just be happy with what we have?" I sat down, feeling a mix of sadness and frustration. "I am happy, Colton. But I also want more for Bianca, for our family." "Is that so wrong?" Colton stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "You know what, Sydney? I'm tired of this. Every day it's the same thing. You want more. I'm going to my mom's." Before I could say anything, he grabbed his keys and left. I was alone with my thoughts and a heavy feeling of dread. This wasn't the first time he had run to his mother, Kate, when we argued. It was becoming his go-to move, and I was left wondering where I stood in our marriage. The next day, Kate called. Her tone was sharp and unfriendly. Sydney, what's this? I heard you and Colton are fighting again. You're pushing him too hard. He's happy with his bakery. Why can't you be? Kate's voice was sharp, full of blame. I gripped the phone tighter, trying to stay calm. Kate, I'm thinking about our future, about Bianca's future. Colton and I need to be on the same page, I said carefully. Well, maybe your page is the problem, Sydney. You're always wanting more. Colton is a simple man, and you knew that when you married him, she snapped back. A flash of anger rose in me. Simple doesn't mean stuck, Kate. I'm trying to build a better future for all of us. She scoffed. You're just being ungrateful and greedy. Colton is doing his best. You should appreciate that. The call ended soon after, with no solution. I hung up feeling more alone than ever. Trouble came fast and hard. Colton's bakery, once the heart of our small community, started losing customers. Bills piled up, and the cozy bakery began to feel more like a sinking ship. I worked long hours to keep us afloat, but it was like trying to bail water out of a boat with a hole in it. One evening, I came home and found Colton slumped at the kitchen table. A stack of bills was spread out in front of him, his face full of defeat. Colton, what's going on? I asked, my stomach sinking. He looked up, his eyes red and tired. The bakery, Sydney. I can't keep it running anymore. We're losing money. My heart sank. What are we going to do? We have Bianca to think about, I said, my voice shaking. Colton ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen too many times. I don't know, Sydney. I never thought it would come to this. I sat down beside him, trying to take it all in. Maybe it's time to consider other options. You could look for a job, at least until we figure things out, I suggested gently. Colton's expression hardened. A job? Work for someone else? I'm a business owner, Sydney, not some office drone, he snapped. I tried to keep my voice calm. Colton, this isn't about pride. It's about our family. We need to make ends meet. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. The tension in the room was suffocating. I don't need a lecture, Sydney. I know what's at stake. Colton snapped before storming out of the room, leaving me with a stack of unpaid bills and a head full of worries. The next day, I decided to call Kate. Maybe she could talk some sense into him. My hands shook as I dialed her number. Kate, it's about the bakery. Colton is really struggling, and I think he needs to consider looking for a job, I said, trying to sound calm. A job? My son isn't going to work for someone else. He's a business owner, Sydney. He's better than that, Kate shot back. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my frustration in check. Kate, the bakery is closing. We have bills to pay, a daughter to raise. This isn't about being better than anything. It's about survival. Kate scoffed. Survive? You always exaggerate, Sydney. Colton will figure it out. He doesn't need to stoop to being an employee. The conversation went nowhere. I hung up, feeling more helpless than ever. Colton's refusal to face reality and Kate's blind support were a disaster waiting to happen. That night, Colton and I sat in silence. The tension between us was so thick it was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to yell, to shake some sense into him. But I knew it wouldn't help. The bakery's closure brought more than financial problems. It tore our family apart. Colton, once a busy and proud business owner, now spent his days idly lounging around the house. I came home from long, exhausting workdays to a messy house, dishes piled in the sink, laundry undone, and Bianca left to entertain herself. One evening, I got home later than usual, my head pounding after a day full of meetings. The house was a mess, and Colton was on the couch with a beer, watching TV. That was the last straw. Colton, what the hell? Look at this place. Can't you at least clean up a little? I snapped, my patience gone. Colton looked up unfazed. Oh, come on, Sydney. I'm not your maid. I had a rough day. I stared at him, shocked. Rough day? Doing what, Colton? You've been sitting here all day. He shrugged, taking another sip of his beer. I'm dealing with stuff, okay? It's not easy losing your business. I threw my bag down, frustration boiling over. And you think it's easy for me? Working all day to keep us afloat while you do nothing. Colton stood up, his face tight with anger. I'm not doing nothing, Sydney. I'm trying to figure things out. Figure what out, Colton? How to avoid responsibility. We have a daughter, for God's sake. I shouted, unable to hold back anymore. I shot back, my voice rising. Don't you think I know that? I don't need you ignoring the problem and making it worse. Colton yelled back, I don't need you nagging me every single day. Our argument grew louder, with harsh words and accusations flying between us. Suddenly, Bianca appeared in the doorway, her wide eyes filled with fear. Mommy, Daddy, please stop yelling, she pleaded, her voice small and shaky. We both froze, the anger draining out of us, as we looked at her. Colton muttered something under his breath and walked out, leaving me to comfort Bianca, who was now crying. I hugged her tightly, guilt and sadness washing over me. The days that followed were a blur of quiet meals, cold exchanges, and an ever-growing distance between us. I struggled to hold everything together, working long hours, managing the house, and taking care of Bianca, while Colton seemed to retreat deeper into himself. The tension in our home hung over us like a heavy cloud, an unwelcome presence that wouldn't leave. But nothing prepared me for what came next. It started with small amounts of cash disappearing from my purse. At first, I thought I was being forgetful, but then the amounts grew larger. One evening, after noticing another $100 missing, I decided to confront Colton. He was in the living room, glued to the TV as usual. Colton, have you been taking money from my purse? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't even look at me.
What? No.
Why would I do that? Anger flared inside me. Because it's missing, Colton. And I know I didn't spend it. He finally turned to face me, his expression defensive. Look, I needed some cash, okay? It's not a big deal. I stared at him, incredulous. Not a big deal? It's stealing, Colton. From your own wife. He stood up, his voice rising. I don't need a lecture, Sydney. I took a bit of cash for beer. It's not like I'm wasting it on something stupid. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Beer?
You're stealing money for beer while I'm working day and night to hold this family together? Colton's face hardened.
Yeah, beer.
It's not like I have much else to enjoy these days. A mix of anger and sadness overwhelmed me. That's your excuse? I'm out there busting my back, and you're sitting here drinking away our money. Colton scoffed. Oh, please. You're always so dramatic. It's just a few bucks. His words cut deep. I felt like I didn't recognize the man standing in front of me anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. This isn't just about the money, Colton. It's about trust. How can I trust you if you're stealing from me? Colton didn't respond. He just turned back to the TV, shutting down the conversation. The next day, I made a decision and called Kate to talk about the situation. It's about Colton, I began, trying to keep my emotions steady. He's been taking money from my purse for beer. Kate laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Oh, Sydney, you're making a big deal out of nothing. He's just going through a tough time. I couldn't believe her reaction. Kate, he's stealing from me. How can you just brush that off? He's your husband, Sydney. What's yours is his, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. Besides, it's just a bit of cash. Anger bubbled up inside me. It's not about the amount, Kate. He's not contributing anything, and now he's taking what little we have left. Kate wouldn't budge. I don't see the problem. He needs to unwind. You're being too hard on him. I hung up, realizing it was pointless. Kate was never going to understand or support me. One morning, I woke up to find Colton's side of the bed empty. That wasn't unusual anymore, but as the days stretched on with no word from him, I started to worry. I called his phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. Days passed, and finally, after a full week of silence, I heard the front door open. Colton walked in looking different. There was a strange confidence about him. And he wasn't alone. His mother, Kate, strutted in behind him, wearing a smug expression. Colton, where the hell have you been? I've been worried sick, I exclaimed, feeling a mix of relief and anger. Colton smirked. Oh, Sydney, always so dramatic. I have news. I frowned, confused. News? What news? He pulled out a lottery ticket and waved it in front of me. This, my dear Sydney, is our ticket out. I won. I won $30 million. My heart skipped a beat.
What? How?
Kate chimed in, her tone dripping with smugness. He bought the lottery ticket with your credit card. Looks like it was a smart investment after all. I was stunned, my mind racing. My credit card? You used my credit card without asking? I said, my voice shaking. Colton's smirk grew wider. Well, I needed something to cheer me up after all the nagging. And look, it paid off. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. He had taken my card, bought a lottery ticket, and won.
It was almost too much to process.
But Colton, that's our money. We won, I said, still trying to make sense of it. Colton's expression turned cold. No, Sydney, I won. And with this money, I'm starting a new life. Without you, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. What are you saying? I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't hesitate, his words sharp and cruel. I'm saying I'm leaving you, Sydney. I'm tired of this life. Tired of you. I want a fresh start, and now I can afford it. Kate laughed, the sound sharp and mean. Oh, Sydney, you really thought you were so clever, didn't you? But you underestimated my son. He's a winner, and you're left with nothing. Colton grabbed a suitcase, clearly packed earlier. I'm moving in with Mom. You can keep the house and whatever else. I don't need it anymore. As Colton walked out, leaving me in shock and heartbreak, I knew I couldn't just let this happen. I had to act. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. Mr. Lucas, I began, my voice trembling. My husband won the lottery with a ticket he bought using my credit card. Now he's leaving me and taking everything. Mr. Lucas, a straightforward and experienced lawyer, listened calmly. All right, Sydney. Let's meet tomorrow. Bring any documents you have and we'll figure this out. The next day, I sat in his office, handing over bank statements and the credit card transaction that showed the purchase of the lottery ticket. Mr. Lucas studied the papers carefully. Based on this, we have a strong case, he said confidently. The ticket was bought with your money, which gives you a claim to the winnings. I felt a flicker of hope. So, what's our next step? We'll file for a court injunction to freeze the lottery winnings until this is resolved. Then we'll prepare for a court battle, he said firmly. The court date came faster than I expected. Colton and Kate were there, their smug expressions as if they had already won. My heart was pounding as I walked into the courtroom, ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. I took my seat in the courtroom, Mr. Lucas sitting beside me. The judge, a stern-looking woman, called the court to order. Mr. Lucas began presenting our case, laying out clear and simple arguments. He focused on the credit card transaction and my role as the main financial support for our family. Colton's lawyer argued that the lottery ticket should be considered separate from our marital assets. But Mr. Lucas countered every point, showing how our finances were shared and highlighting that Colton had contributed little to the household. Then it was Colton's turn to take the stand. His lawyer asked, Mr. Olivier, did you use your wife's credit card to purchase the lottery ticket? Colton replied, a hint of arrogance in his voice. Yes, but it was just luck. It had nothing to do with her. The lawyer continued, and what were your intentions with the winnings? Colton glanced at me before answering, to start a new life. I was tired of being underappreciated and belittled. I felt a surge of anger, but kept quiet. When it was my turn to testify, Mr. Lucas asked, Mrs. Olivier, can you tell the court about your financial contributions to your household? I took a deep breath. I've been the main provider for the past few years. I've paid the bills, taken care of our daughter, and even supported Colton's mother financially. The judge listened carefully, taking notes as I spoke. After both sides finished their arguments, the judge called for a recess before making her decision. The wait was nerve-wracking. When we were called back in, the judge looked at us both and delivered her verdict. Considering the evidence and circumstances, I rule that the lottery winnings are a joint marital asset. I award 3/4 of the winnings to Mrs. Olivier and 1/4 to Mr. Olivier. Colton's face was frozen in shock, and Kate's smug expression vanished. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. This wasn't just a legal win, it was justice. After the courtroom drama, my life took a new turn. My focus was on Bianca and building a secure future for us. I invested the winnings wisely, making sure we would be financially stable. Meanwhile, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Colton and Kate had squandered their share on unnecessary luxuries and were now left with nothing. One day, while I was out running errands, I bumped into Colton. He looked like a shadow of his former self, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, with a defeated air about him. "Sydney," he said, his voice bitter, "look at what you've done to me." I looked at him calmly and said, "No, Colton, look at what you've done to yourself." Then I walked away, ready to focus on the life I had fought to rebuild. "I'm broke, in debt, and they're taking the house," Colton blurted out, desperation in his voice. I looked at him, feeling no sympathy. "Colton, you did this to yourself. You and your mother couldn't handle the money, and now you're paying the price." He scowled, bitterness clear in his tone. "So what? You're just going to gloat? Watch me suffer." I shook my head firmly. "I'm not gloating, Colton. I'm just living my life. You made your choices and I made mine." I cut him off as he tried to interrupt. "You and your mother never forgave me for taking what was rightfully mine. You wasted your share without thinking about the future. That's on you." Colton's face twisted with anger, but I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. "You could have shared more, you could have." I interrupted him again. "I could have what, Colton? Bailed you out after you betrayed me? After you and your mother laughed in my face?"
No. I've moved on.
He stood there, defeated, as I turned and walked away. In that moment, I realized how far I had come. I had faced betrayal and heartache, but I didn't let it destroy me. Instead, I built a better life for Bianca and me, a life grounded in hard work and smart choices.